think it's so scary, like, have an allergy, and like I think a lot of people, like, if they don't have an allergy, they just don't quite like understand like what it feels like. I think there's a bit of like a hesitance with the EpiPen, and I completely understand that. Like, I think previously my mindset only use the EpiPen if it's like the last resort. Yeah, I am nervous. Like I said, I've never ever done anything like this. So the news is, like, I've been wanting to say this for long. I don't want to keep you waiting until like halfway through the episode, but next year,
it's the podcast. Can I ask for two massive favors from you guys? The first one being, if you're listening to the podcast, make sure to click that subscribe button. The more listeners, the bigger guests I can get on the podcast to kind of share their stories and break the stigma. And the second favor being, if you're watching this on YouTube, over 89% of you guys have not clicked that subscribe button. So if you are enjoying the podcast, make sure to click that subscribe button. Honestly, it means the world to me, and honestly, I appreciate all your support. Let's jump back into the podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Make Insane. This episode's a bit different because I don't have a guest. I was like, you know what, I'm going to actually use this hour to actually do a podcast just with me and you, the listener, because there's some massive, really exciting news I want to tell you. I've been hiding this for so long. The reason being I've been hiding it was I had to tell work and make them aware before, obviously, I do this podcast and talk about it very publicly. But yeah, I just want to say, honestly, like this year, looking back, it's just been a bit of a mad year. Like, I never thought I would be able to do a podcast like once a week for like nearly a year. I mean, I started at the end of February and it's been one a week since then. And I think that's down to your guys' support. Honestly, I really appreciate all the listeners. Like, this year is like something mad, like a 218% increase of listeners compared to last year. And honestly, I just want to say thanks so much for the support. I absolutely love doing the podcast, and honestly, I love meeting people and being able to have a conversation and get them to kind of open up to me about their life, and hopefully get them to open up about stuff which I haven't like spoke about openly before on other podcasts or just in general, really. And my dad actually came into my bedroom. This was like a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, why do you do the podcast? Like he was asking me like why. And I think with my parents, I don't know, like I think it's a generation thing. Like, I think it's one of them, like, if it's like not making you like loads of money, like why do you spend all the hours every night working on it or doing it? And I think that's just kind of like a generation thing. Like, sometimes they don't get it, kind of thing. Like, for me, I think it's always been about like, don't know, I get a buzz about like just meeting new people from all different walks of life and kind of open up about their story. And like, obviously it's all about stigmas as well, so get them to open up about their conditions, and it not only educates me, obviously, hopefully brings value to the listeners as well. And for me, it's important, definitely for guys, to talk about mental health. So it's something I've kind of want to open up more on the podcast, which I'll get to. But yeah, for me, it's all about just obviously meeting people, just having hopefully interesting conversations, and hopefully like what you guys enjoy. Like I said, it started off breaking the stigma surrounding kind of food allergies, and also this year it's obviously been very different, and I was a bit scared initially because I thought, well, if I talk about other topics, like people are just not going to be interested, or they're just not going to listen to the podcast, and that hasn't been the case whatsoever. So yeah, I've got to be super grateful in that sense that like people are still listening to the podcast, and I've got a range of guests which isn't always allergies. Don't get me wrong, when I had Dr. Rahandhauer, yeah, I said that right then, on the podcast the other day, we got so many listeners. It was mad, just because it was allergies. And I think it annoys me, actually, if I was honest. Like, I've seen some people where they like monetize having a doctor on a platform, and then you've got to pay to like listen to the podcast. I would never ever do that. If like I've got someone on like a doctor who I know it's going to help people with food allergies, why would you monetize that? Like, I just find it mad. Like, some people like charging people to listen to these people. Like, for me, I've always got these people on and gave it away for free because like I want to give value, and it helps me so much from a personal aspect as well about my anxiety and allergies, like, but also like for the listeners as well. And yeah, the news is, like, I've been wanting to say this for long. I don't want to keep you waiting until like halfway through the episode, but next year I'm traveling around South America for 6 months, and it's honestly, it just feels weird saying it because I just never thought I would ever be able to do that. And I think the reason I felt like that was because of my food allergy. Like, when you have an allergy, you feel like it stops you from like traveling or like doing things or like going out. And yeah, it just feels like surreal that I'm actually saying this. And I know in South America they don't really cook with too many nuts. And don't get me wrong, I'm like nervous. Like obviously my anxiety, I'm like, it's sometimes it's bad in the UK. So I'm like, oh my God, like what is my anxiety gonna be like traveling around South America for 6 months? Also we're going to like Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, Chile, Argentina, Brazil. So we're actually starting off in Brazil for the carnival. And yeah, I'm nervous. Like, to be honest, I'm actually more nervous. Not necessarily about going, more about my allergies, to be honest. I think like there's such like a mental kind of part to that. Is like, oh my God, like how am I going to get on? How I'm going to do when I get out there? Like I've been trying to practice my Spanish. So obviously I can kind of translate to them as well. Obviously I've been really lucky. I've actually partnered up with like Equal Eats, which do like allergy cards. So I'll be obviously like creating content out there with the Equal Eats card. So yeah, super grateful for like Kyle for kind of teaming up with me on that one. And like I say, I think translating my allergy out there is going to be so important, just so they like completely understand like how serious it is. But yeah, it's not long now. Like obviously we're near Christmas now. Like what is it, like 7-8 weeks we're going to be flying out to Rio for the carnival. I think we're going to stay like in an Airbnb, and then we'll probably like start staying in the hostels and like jump in the deep end, you could say. But yeah, it just seems like surreal, really, like this is actually happening. And the reason being was like a few of our friends had been. I think I had like Giselle on the podcast, and she went to South America for 6 months, and then now they're in Asia. And we had other friends like Phil and Camilla who went out to South America for 6 months. And it's something which, I don't know, within our like friend group kind of thing, like more people are like doing it. And I think initially when our friends did it, like they did it at, like they was like saving up like during like the lockdown for it. And I think like for myself, I was like, I just thought I would never be able to save up for it. So the only way we kind of did this was like, look, like if we move out of our family homes and then we're not paying a fortune, because obviously I've been in London for 8 years and was paying like honestly like over £1,000 for rent each month. So it was like, look, if we're not paying that much money on rent, or we go out less, like we could maybe actually do this. And it's something I think I've always wanted to kind of travel, but I don't know what, I kind of like didn't do a gap year really. I kind of jumped straight to London and started working really. But I think now is a good time to do it. I've just turned 31. Like my parents have been supportive of it. Like, yeah, I'm just excited to get out there. Like I said, I think from the allergy point of view, I think I also want to show people as well, like if you've got an allergy, you can still live your life. Because I think a lot of people sometimes feel like they've got this allergy, like they can't go abroad or they can't eat in restaurants. And there's a lot of like fear and anxiety surrounding like allergies. So I kind of want to prove to everyone with a food allergy, like, look, I'm traveling around South America for 6 months. Like, you can do it too. So definitely want to kind of like document as much as I can. Also, I want to enjoy the holiday as well. Like, I think sometimes there's a balance where I don't want to be like working like thinking of it as like a job, like, oh God, I've got to create content. So it's just, for me, it's all about like, yeah, finding that balance as well. Like, because as soon as you start feeling like something's a job, then you just like, it kind of takes that joy away. So, I mean, with the podcast as well, like it's a really tricky one. I think I'm going to take like, after this episode, I'm actually probably going to take like a couple of weeks off, and then just before I go, relaunch the podcast. And it might be a podcast every 2 weeks. So I'm going to try and get a few guests lined up before then. But once I'm out there, like I still want to like take the podcast on the road as well. And even doing episodes like this where it's just me and the microphone, I think I love to kind of do these kind of like South America podcast vlogs, you could say, where I just kind of talk about like what I've been up to in South America, like how's my experience been like eating out there with the food, like obviously my experiences, obviously the people I meet, and also like the people I meet as well. Like I want to be able to obviously like interview people out there as well, which is super exciting. Like to kind of like just really mix up. Like obviously may contain, it can be anything I want really, like you said, like predominantly like because of my allergy it's always going to be like allergy related, but like when I'm out there, like maybe I don't want to talk about allergies all the time, and like I get other people talking about other conditions or their life or what they've been up to kind of thing. Because I feel like if I was doing a podcast every week just talking about allergies, I think my anxiety would be so bad. Like I honestly just think like it would make it 10 times worse. And I think that's something like I experienced when I started like making saying, was I was always like, I felt like I was never that anxious, and then started making saying, I was like researching about allergies and doing allergy content all the time. It just made me like super anxious. So I think with the blog, like, or anything, like, I think if you talk about something too much, it just ends up just bringing back all these experiences. And I recently got a therapist as well, and I think that's something I wasn't necessarily going to do it, to be honest. Like, and I was like, look, like, what harm is it going to do to get a therapist for go away? And she might be able to kind of help, obviously, with that kind of allergy anxiety, but just in general, just like, I'm not going to come here and say, look, my mental health is like really bad, but like I do suffer with anxiety because of my allergy, but also like sometimes like anxiety in life. So yeah, it's been great obviously to have a therapist, and she's been incredible, to be honest. Like she's really kind of opened up the way I think, like how I kind of not think of myself, but how I kind of think about situations. And I'm being really open. Like I always said to her, like I feel like I don't really have many highs, but I don't have like many lows. I feel very like stagnated. And she said, like, look, there's some people where their highs and lows are really visible, and she's like, you definitely have highs and lows. It's just maybe not as like visible to other people. And she asked me this question, and I wanna talk about this because other people might be in the same situation. It might actually help with people, but also as well, like, I don't know, like I literally said, like, she was like, when was you last happiest? When was that kind of happy moment? And for me, I was like, look, I was on a beach in Cornwall. I was at a friend's wedding, and I think it was the day after. We all went to the beach, just me and my girlfriend, my friend Ben, and his missus, and we had a bottle of champagne. We're on the beach, and we're in Cornwall, and we're like going in the sea, and I don't know what it was. Like, I was so fucking happy in that moment. Like, I just couldn't explain it. Like, I've not felt that in so long. It was so weird that it was such a strong feeling. And the therapist turned around and said, what it is, Dan, is like, in that moment, you was living in that moment. And she's like, probably sometimes you live in your head too much. And that is so true. Like, day to day, I'm always thinking about like the podcast, or what content should I be creating, or who I should be interviewing, or what questions I should be asking. And I do honestly like sometimes get so caught up in my head that sometimes I'm not as present as I was like. And it really kind of like took me back, really. And she's like, look, it's a skill. Like, you've got to practice it, like being in that moment and embracing it. And it's definitely something I want to do, like, once I'm out in like South America, is just to like really embrace these moments and like really, really enjoy it. And yeah, I don't want to like come back and be like, oh, like, I wish I enjoyed it more, or I wish I did this. Like, and I think that's the reason, like, with even like the podcast and like making say, I don't know how much content I'm going to do out there. Like, I think it'd be a shame like not to like have this opportunity to like create content and kind of show people like, look, you've got an allergy, you can do this. So I think for me, it's just kind of like finding that balance of like enjoying it. And yeah, I am nervous. Like I said, I've never ever done anything like this. I did like traveling around Europe when I was like, I think it was like second or third year in uni. Like did like Milan, Florence, Venice, Budapest, Prague, Croatia, and I had a really good experience. Like, I did have one allergic reaction. I was there for 3 weeks, and that was in I think it was in Croatia or Prague. I think it might have been Prague actually. And basically just had a chicken wrap, and next minute came out in hives. It was so scary. But I think in that situation, I said to my friends, like, look, you've got to be as like calm as possible. If you get yourself like worked up, it's only going to get me kind of worked up as well. So took me onto a scene, and thank God it calmed down. But it's so scary, isn't it? Like being in a foreign country and coming out in hives, like. But I think the one thing I've learned this year from having like Professor Adam Fotts on the podcast, Dr. Rand Hauer, like all these professors or doctors, is don't hesitate to use the EpiPen. Really don't hesitate. If you feel like your neck is swollen up and you've got hives, you've got all the symptoms, use the EpiPen. And I think there's a bit of like a hesitance with the EpiPen, and I completely understand that. Like I think previously my mindset was like only use the EpiPen if it's like the last resort. But there's no harm, right? If you honestly feel like your neck's swelling, you got the hives, it's best to administer the EpiPen earlier than later. The longer you leave it, like the worse like the reaction or the worse the anaphylaxis could be. So I think that's one of the most important things I've learned, is just like, look, don't hesitate using the EpiPen. And like I said, I used it. I had a bit of a panic attack, and I think I used it when maybe I shouldn't have, but like I do not regret it, because I honestly thought like my neck was swelling up. And look, there's no harm to like use the EpiPen. It's adrenaline. But yeah, I think that's something like before I was maybe my headspace was like always a bit hesitant. Definitely, like, I think that came from my parents as well. I think my parents always like was petrified to like use the EpiPen. Obviously, when I was younger, there's a few times where I had like severe like allergic reactions. I think the worst one was parents. So we had this like kind of like static caravan, and basically what had happened was my friend, like their friends came over and they got Chinese, and they got like chips from the Chinese, and mum's like, oh well, you can't have Chinese, so we'll just put a pizza in the oven for you. So I'm having this pizza, and my mum's friend like turned around and was like, oh Dan, like do you want some chips? And I was maybe like 15 at the time and just didn't really like think about it, and I was like, yeah, like I'll have some chips, like just chips. Like I had a few chips. Like about 20 minutes later, I was like, oh, I just feel a bit sick, like I'm gonna go to bed. So I went to bed, and there was no signs at this point of like any hives or anything. So I went to bed, couldn't sleep, was like getting like going up and getting sick, and then went back to bed, and I was like, I just don't feel right. So I ended up like, I remember going back over to my parents. I was like, look, something doesn't feel right. And my mum's like, can we see your chest? So I showed my chest, and there was a few hives, and my parents were like, oh my God, it's like you have an allergic reaction. So I took the tablets, and then it just went from like 0 to 100. And I think that's another thing I learned this year, was like reactions, like they don't always happen straight away. Like sometimes like reactions can like happen an hour later, or like in this case, I don't know how long it was. It was maybe like 30 or like 40 minutes later that reaction happened. And they chucked me in the back of the car, like rushed me straight to hospital. I just remember this car journey, because my mum, you always used to get like so upset. Like obviously you can get it, like your child like is having an allergic reaction, like it can be fatal. And like she was getting so upset, and yeah, like in that moment, like I think there's times where like they could have maybe like used the EpiPen, but there's always hesitance, and that isn't their fault whatsoever. I think that was just like back then there was such a lack of like education and definitely training around the EpiPen. Like usually this gave you an EpiPen to like watch a YouTube video, like, and that's because there was like a lack of training. By the time I got to hospital, my lips were swelling, like I don't remember my airways blocking up at that point, but it was definitely going down that road. So they give me these tablets that basically like spewing it back up, because like nothing was working. And then in the end, like they ended up putting me on the drip, so it went straight into the bloodstream. And I just remember being so itchy. Like I've never felt itch like it, where your whole body is itchy. So I'm just thinking about it now, like scary, man. Like yeah, I think it's just scary, like, having an allergy. And like, I think a lot of people, like, if they don't have an allergy, they just don't quite like understand like what it feels like. And me just going back to that moment then, it's just like, yeah, scary, man. And I've been like, touch wood, got a wooden table, like I'm not like experienced that since. But yeah, that's what I mean with like going to South America. I'm just in this whole different world, and I am scared. I am scared about allergies and everything, but I can't let my allergies stop me. And I've spoke to loads of people, and like, nuts isn't like one of their main ingredients. It isn't like me going to like Asia where everything is like cut in like peanut oil and there's like nuts everywhere kind of thing. And like, I think people sometimes have this like thing where like, if they've been to South America once and they saw nuts, like they want to tell me, like, please don't tell me, like that's just going to make me anxiety worse. I don't know why people do that. I remember like, I was like going to Paris and like someone was like, well, Paris is like the worst place for allergies. I had such a bad experience. And then I went and had the best experience. So I think that sometimes people feel the need to like tell you if they've had a bad experience somewhere. And I think sometimes like, it's like, I don't need to hear that. Like I've already booked the tickets. I've got the flights. I'm going out there. Like I'm going to live the best life, enjoy it and stuff. So yeah, it's mad really. Obviously I've handed in my notice at work. My work have just been absolutely incredible. And I'll give them a shout out. Like BBC My Show have just been absolutely incredible. The team, my manager, such a great company. Everyone is just so nice, and they've been so understanding when I mentioned that obviously I'm kind of going to go out to like South America for 6 months and stuff. And he even said that if I want to come back, like they will, with open hands. And yeah, it's really nice because I think like in life, like sometimes you just work with companies where they're so shit. I've worked at a previous like company before where the management was really bad. Like when I was suffering with anxiety, like they wasn't there for me and they just left me out in the cold and put me on reports. It was really like bad, like really bad practice. And I've worked with like companies like that, especially the last company I worked for was terrible with that. And it's great to finally find a company where they support you, they want the best for you. Yeah, so I feel really kind of blessed and lucky in that sense. Like you have these shit experiences, but it always makes you up to when you get a good experience, you feel grateful for it, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna end it on this. I'm glad I did this as like a long form piece of content, so I can really get across like my feelings and emotions. If you are new to the podcast or your phone, please make sure to click that subscribe button, or if you want to share it on your social media. Honestly, I always appreciate all the support. And like I said, this isn't the end of the podcast. Like you said, I'm going to be coming back at probably like mid-February. I'll probably relaunch the podcast. And then once I'm out there, I'm going to try and do some podcasts, whether it's just me on the microphone or it's me and other people out in South America. Super excited to kind of get the podcast and like shake it up a little bit, and this really just keep evolving the podcast and kind of see where it goes really. But yeah, for me this is a bit of a diary as well. But yeah, thanks again for everyone if you listen from the start to the end. Honestly, appreciate all the support and hope everyone has a good Christmas and New Year. Thanks again.